Hey everybody, Matt Meyer here, Legacy Autosport. We're actually at Legacy Autosport today. We're doing something a little different. I'm doing a interview with Louis Meyer III. We're going to talk a little bit about his past, what he's done through his career, and what he's doing today. So, stay tuned. Hey everybody, Matt here with Louis Meyer. We're going into the trophy cabinet today, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we have in there here at Legacy Autosport. So what do we got here?
Well, first of all, we have the ring from 1997 when Tony Stewart won the IRL championship. I built Tony's engines, and when he won that championship, so at the end of the year, we all got nice rings. Also have this ring here from 1999. I ran the engine shop at Team Menard, and when Greg Ray won the championship, the IRL championship, and so we got rings then too. And I have one other ring. I also was with Patrick Racing in '73 when they won the 500, and also in 1982 when they won the 500. But back then, they really didn't give out rings to the crew and stuff. That's something that's just come about, a few years ago. But we did in 1982. We won the Indy 500. We won the Michigan 500, which this ring right here from 1982 was given to my father, Sonny. And I did build that engine that was in that car, so he thought that I should have the ring, so he gave me the ring. But we did win the Michigan 500, we won the Indy 500, and we were getting ready to win the Pocono 500, which back then was the Triple Crown. And if you won all three races, I think it was $1 million prize money. And we just had a few laps to go with Gordon Johncock, and he was leading the race, and we had a gearbox failure. And so anyways, we didn't get the Triple Crown, but we had a pretty good season that year. So 1982 was a good year for Patrick Racing.
Tell me a little bit about how you started in racing and really working your way up.
Well, that's how I started racing quarter midgets when I was 6 years old. And my dad bought me a quarter midget, started racing quarter midgets. And then he took care of a midget race driver's engine for that ran at Ascot named Don Horvath. And he had a 122 cubic inch Offie midget engine in there. So Don would bring the engine by our house, and we had a 2-car garage, 2 wide but 4-car deep, and the back 2-car garage part was a workshop. And my dad built roadsters in there. We had my quarter midget in there. We did engines in there, and so what we do is Don would bring his engine in. I would help my dad tear the engine down and wash the parts up and everything. And my dad would take the block in and stuff. He'd cut the seats, hone the block, and get the bearings fit, do everything, then bring it home. Then him and I would work together, putting the engine back together. I was about 8 years old then when we started doing that. Then in 1964, 65, my grandfather, Louis Meyer, sold out to Dale Drake. And we started Louis Meyer Incorporated in Indianapolis, Indiana, which was the sole distributorship for the Ford racing engine. And so on weekends and stuff, and if I didn't have homework to do after school, I would go to the shop and work on double cam Ford engines. And so I was about 10, 11 years old, and started putting some double cam Ford engines together. And we take them over to George Magnotti's shop, which is over on the west side of Indianapolis, and dyno them over there, because we didn't have a dyno at our facility at Louis Meyer Incorporated, so we used George's dyno. But just that's how I got started, just working on Offie midget engines and then double cam Fords.
So then, as you worked in the field, where did that progress to? What
Well,
teams did you work with?
let's see. Like I said, I started out running quarter midgets. That was in California when we were out there. And then when we moved back here, worked at the shop for a while, and I raced go-karts, and then ran sprint cars for a while, and then ran what they call mini Indy cars. I ran a season of that. I really kind of wanted to drive race cars, but I got married, and we had a baby on the way, and so my dad told me, he goes, I want you to stop driving, concentrate on the engine building and doing that kind of stuff. So I went to work at Lewis Meyer Incorporated. After the Ford engine deal, Foyt bought it from Lewis Meyer Incorporated and Ford Motor Company, rebadged the engine, the Foyt Ford. We moved Lewis Meyer Incorporated to another location. And my dad just did outside work. We did, we did Offies, we did Fords, we did Chevys, we did all kinds of stuff out of there. And so in 1970, end of 72, George Bignotti came to my dad and said, hey, Patrick wants to get a team going. And he goes, I'm going to be running it, and I'd like to bring that team in here, and we'll have the race shop in the front building, and then we'll have the engine shop in the back, and let's team up together. So that's what happened in 1972, 73. Patrick's team was at Lewis Meyer Incorporated. The front building was Patrick Racing. The back building was Lewis Meyer Incorporated. And we did the engines exclusively for Patrick Racing then. Didn't have to do much outside work. Did do some, like honing blocks and doing rods and stuff like that. But most of the engine builds were all done specifically for Patrick Racing. Worked at Patrick Racing from 1973 until, about 1978. Left Patrick Racing to go run my sprint car, and then came back at the end of 1981 and worked at Patrick Racing until 1986. So I was there at Patrick for a while, left Patrick Racing and went to Granatelli Racing, was there for 5 years. And then Granatelli closed his team down, so I moved, that was in Phoenix, Arizona, so moved back to Indiana and went to work with Kenny Irwin Jr., his midget team, and built the engines and helped run that midget program. And so I just kind of kept my eyes open, and John Menard was going to open a shop here in Indianapolis, so I went ahead and turned in a resume to do that, and then that was when I went to work at John Menard's Team Menard, and then worked at Team Menard for almost 10 years. And so that's kind of where I went.
Now, didn't you also not only work on teams, but you also worked in the league as well?
Yeah, when in 2002, I decided to leave Team Menard, and I wanted to do something a little bit different other than just building engines and working on cars. So I thought, well, I'll check and see if the IRL needs anybody. So I called Brian Barnhart, talked to him, and he called me back about 2 weeks later and said, hey, would you like to be the technical director of the Indy Lights Series along with the executive director, Roger Bailey? And I said, I'd love it. So Roger and I got together, and Brian, and worked out the deal. And so I was Indy Lights technical director for the Indy Racing League for 5 years. And then I got the dumb idea after being there for 5 years. Roger and I, when we started in that series, we had maybe 10, 12 cars. We built that series up to almost 30 cars. And so anyways, I got the bright idea one to own my own team and have an Indy Lights team. So I partnered up with Jim Guthrie, and we started Guthrie Meyer Racing. But Guthrie Meyer Racing only lasted just a little bit less than a year. We had some issues within the team, and so Jim and I decided to split company, and so we dissolved. I let Jim buy me out of Guthrie Meyer Racing, and then went on and started working for a company that designed and built turbochargers. And Did that for about 5 years, and then my son came to me and said, "Hey, I've got an opportunity to start a USF Pro 2000 team in the road to Indy. Would you like to come and do that?" And I said, "Heck yeah! I'm getting tired of this regular normal job. I want to get back to racing." So my son started Legacy Autosport. Michael Meyer started. That's what I'm doing up to now.
So with Legacy Autosport, it's more of a teaching to all your experience from the past, and you're teaching these drivers what you've learned, or putting forth the knowledge, or what's. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, when you're in IndyCar, those drivers already reached the pinnacle, so you're working with true professional drivers. Everybody has their job of what they do. It all comes together, and you go out and you win the race. The road to Indy is a lot different because you get these young kids who this is their training, this is their college, we're developing them to move up the ladder to get to IndyCar. So they're pretty raw when we get them, most of them. And it was really strange for me at first because, I'm expecting a driver to come in and give me feedback on the car and different things and all that stuff. And a lot of these kids really struggle with that. So that's why we have to have driver coaches, we have to have dartfish, we have to have all kinds of stuff. So after they run, to be able to take them in the office, sit down, show them the video. We have a driver coach, Alex Barron, that used to drive the Indy cars. He helps out. And it's just a little different scenario. It took a little while to get used to, but it's fulfilling to see these kids because some of them come along, and I'll be honest with you, they don't have any talent. And then some of them come along and they have a lot of talent, and I'm thinking I can't wait to see them move up the ladder and get their shot in IndyCar.
So speaking of that, since you're working with the newer talent and kind of leading the way with them, who are some of the more notable drivers that in the past that you've actually worked with?
Well, I knew you were going to ask that, so I made a list up here.
All right.
Well, let's see. At Patrick Racing, I had Johnny Rutherford, Swede Savage, Gordon Johncock, Wally Dallenbach, Tom Bagley, Gordon Smiley, Steve Krisloff, Mario Andretti, Danny Angaias, Chip Ganassi, Pancho Carter, Emerson Fittipaldi, Bruno Giacomelli, Sammy Swindell, Rich Vogler, Don Whittington, Kevin Cogan. There's probably a couple that I missed. At Granatelli Racing, Tom Sneva, Ari Lyondike, Roberto Guerrero, Al Unser Sr., Didier Tays, John Andretti. And then at Team Menard, we had Raul Boiselle, Jeff Brabham, Scott Brayton, Robbie Buell, Eddie Cheever, Robbie Gordon, Steve Kinzer. Did engines for Steve. He didn't run for Menard, but we did his engines. Buddy Lazier, Ari Lyondike, Vitor Mira, Greg Ray, Mark Dismore, Jock Lazier, and Tony Stewart. So quite a few drivers. I was looking over the list. Actually, 10 of those drivers are Indy 500 winners. So I had the honor, I had the pleasure of working with some really great drivers. And like Tony Stewart, you'll see here that Tony Stewart, when we won the championship in '97, he gave me that helmet, signed it and everything. That's the hat and the bottle of champagne that we had at the celebration, and for the Tony Stewart championship win. Working with Tony was awesome because I knew Tony when he started out in midgets, and he wasn't really known, and how he worked his way up to the sprint cars and Silver Crown and the whole deal. And then to get the opportunity, Larry Curry went to John Menard and set it up to where Tony could come and do a test for us in the IndyCar. And he got in that IndyCar, and we knew within 10 minutes, I mean, this kid had the talent, and he was going to be a great IndyCar driver. So I really enjoyed working with Tony a lot. It was a lot of fun, and like I say, when he put that helmet on, he knew we could win the race. A little side story on the Tony Stewart deal is I kind of want to set the record straight about something. Tony Stewart had the talent to win the Indy 500 every race that he was out there. We had the Buick engine. Man, I'll tell you what, trying to get that engine to run 500 miles, as hard as we were turning it, much power as it was making and everything, was really a struggle. We had some people within the team that wanted to really crank the RPM up on the engines. Those rocker arm engines couldn't take it. They run about 9,000 to 9,200. They run all day, but you want to turn that engine 10,000, you usually break something in the valve train. But same thing happened the last year that Tony Stewart drove for us. We had a qualifying engine. We did a ton of testing with it to get the power up on it, and then we had our Indy 500 race engine, 2 separate engines. We worked about 3 months on that Indy 500 race engine when we had the Chevys and in the IRL, and we worked about 3 months on that engine to get an engine that we knew would run 500 miles, be good and reliable, but have enough power that could win the race. So we put the qualifying engine in, and we went out and qualified. Tony qualified out on the front row. And so anyways, we got back to the shop. We pulled the qualifying engine out and got back to the shop, and we got the race engine. Well, our team manager at that time came to me and said, how much horsepower are we down on the race motor from the qualifier? And I said, about 15 horsepower. But the thing is that 15 horsepower wasn't going to be the difference between winning or losing the Indy 500. We needed reliability is what we needed. Our motors pulled enough power, but we needed reliability. So I told him about 15 horsepower, and he said, well, I'm not going to sacrifice 15 horsepower. I want you to put that engine back in the car, and we're going to run it in the race. So I told him, I said, that engine will not last over 100 miles. I said, the cams in it are so radical that they're having trouble making us valve springs that'll last any time at all. So those engines are built to do about 100 miles. And then we have the race engine that has the milder cams in it and different parts, and that thing will run all day. You put that engine in, Tony Stewart will win the Indy 500. He wouldn't have anything to do with it. So the qualifying engine went back in the car, and guess what? On race day, I think it was right about 100 miles, Tony Stewart pulled over because he dropped the valve because the valve spring broke. So, you know, the engine department got blamed for that on TV and then, in the newspaper and everything else about how their engines, couldn't run 500 miles and all that. But you got to kind of look at things. You've got to look at what you're trying to accomplish. And, the most horsepower always doesn't win the race, especially at the Indy 500. So that's just kind of a side story. And that made me feel pretty bad because that was Tony's last year with us. I knew Tony could win the Indy 500 with Team Menard, and I thought we had a really good shot. And that race engine was sitting back at the shop, and the other engine was in there, and it blew up.
Wow, that's crazy. What year was that?
I think it was 98.
Okay.
98 or 99, right in there, yeah. When Tony, because Tony left Team Menard to go run for Joe Gibbs in NASCAR, and then he did come back, and he ran, I think, Ganassi's car once, and then he ran, I think, his own deal one time. But with Team Menard, it was either 98 or 99.
So for up-and-coming mechanics or up-and-coming drivers in the series, what advice would you give to them?
Well, first of all, if you want to get into racing, you have to have a passion for it, because you're not going to get paid for all the hours and all the time involved and everything. I mean, if you're on a race team, like when I was at Patrick Racing, we would work, on the road, we're working 7 days a week, but back at the shop, we work a minimum of 6. And then, like at Patrick Racing, we built our own cars, so we would race the entire season. We'd come back and take a week off, and then everybody was back at the shop 7 days a week until the 1st of March, and we'd finish our cars, and we'd be building new cars. We'd be, doing motor stuff. We'd be building gearboxes, building chassis, making all these parts, and everybody all got together and had their area, what they needed to do. And like I was running the lathe making parts for the cars, making spud spacers and and all kinds of stuff, and besides working in the engine department there. But you have to have a passion for racing. You have to love it, and because like I say, the pay that you're going to get is never going to cover the hours you put in. But you know what, I don't think I've ever worked in racing for the money. I work in racing because I do love it. I want to go to the racetrack and I want to be the fastest car and I want to win the race. And that means more to me, I think, than having $1 million in the bank, you know? The Meyer family, in 4 years, with my grandfather, my father, myself, my son Michael, and Matthew, and in the next 4 years, a Meyer has participated, not necessarily in IndyCar, but like now we're in the road to Indy, but has been at Indy in the month of May in 4 years, 100 years. And one thing that really stuck with me is my grandfather always told me, he was a good man, I'll tell you what, I was really blessed to spend a lot of time with him and my grandmother. They were great people. And my grandpa instilled a lot of things in me, and one of them was, you got to really work hard, Butch. You got to really keep after it. Even if you fail, don't get discouraged and just keep working and keep fighting. And he goes, eventually you're going to win. He always used to tell me, he'd say, he goes, you're going to have good luck about 10% of the time, and he goes, things are going to go wrong about 90%, but he goes, that 10%, you're really going to enjoy it. And what he instilled in me, and another thing about my grandfather is of all the years I've been around people that have known him, been around the speedway and everything, I've never had one person come to me and say, hey, your grandpa did this or did that, or never had a bad word of my grandfather or my father. And, your reputation means everything in business, and to be able to have them to set that, and then for me to come along, I'm hoping that when I move on and I'm not around anymore, they go, yeah, Butch is a pretty decent guy. But, it's just, that's the biggest part of being in racing is you got to love it. And you've got to work your butt off in it, and you've got to do the right thing, and that's what makes a true racer, I think.